Andy is the best.
Andy might be the best. Mariano's got King
When he
10
play the
suited.
bike game.
The what? The 5?
Play the bike game.
Charles, 3-betting.
No anymore.
Andy's got ace 4.
I don't know.
Could we see a cold 4-bet? No, he's going to call, though. Mariano's going to 4-bet, though.
Good fold.
Charles calls.
Good fold.
He's a pen fold.
Andy may be considering something.
Ah, good call.
He just calls. $27,000 in the pot. Diamonds are cheap.
In this video for PokerNews.com, we have a raise for Mariano under the gun, playing about $300,000 deep at 100, 200. That is more big blinds than I can possibly count. 1,500? Sure. Okay, $1,500 deep. Mariano opens it up under the gun with the King 10 suited. Over around to Charles on the button, playing $200,000 deep, give or take. He makes it 2,000. Sure. Whenever you're playing super duper deep stacked, splash around, battle, do whatever you want. Over around to Andy in the big blind, covering Mariano with ace 4 diamonds. He could 4-bet, he could call, he could fold, but that would be a little bit nitty. I think you can go either way between call and 4-bet when you're playing 1,500 big blinds deep. So Andy does indeed call. Fine. Back around to Mariano. Seems like a reasonable spot to call to me, but he does not. He bumps it up. Bump it up. Let's go up. He makes it $9,000. Whew, that's some action. So we have King 10 suited raising under the gun. 8-7 suited 3-betting on the button. Ace 4 suited cold calling in the big blind. King 10 suited 4-betting under the gun. 8-7 of hearts opts to call on the button. Andy might as well call and try to flop the nuts. Let's go to the flop.
Do we get a potential diamond flop? Oh, no! You got to be kidding me. We've got a straight flush against the nut flush.
We have a potential diamond flop. That's right. Flop comes. Queen, Jack, 9, all diamonds. Andy flops the nuts, almost. Actually, it's only the third nuts, unfortunately for him, because Mariano has the actual nuts. One of the 2 straight flushes. Charles has nothing. Out of position. Andy's only option is to check. He should be checking with everything in the spot. Mariano, as the 4-better, on this board, I think he probably just wants to bet and get money in the pot, because it's always a disaster when you happen to be against the random ace of diamonds that would have easily check called or perhaps check raised the flop, and you check through the flop, and then you just don't get a whole lot of money in the pot. You'd much rather bet and give them a chance to load their money in. I realize that whenever you do have the super duper nuts, it's usually fine to let your opponents see another card because whatever they're drawing to is drawing dead. But in this situation on a 3 high card board, in a 4-bet pot, it is so likely that someone either has the ace of diamonds or a pair with some sort of straight draw. That's just not going to fold to a small bet like $8,000. So I think Mariano probably wants to go ahead and start putting money in the pot immediately. This is a little bit different whenever you have like quads, right? Say you raise with pocket jacks and 2 people call and it comes Jack, Jack, 3. You know, maybe you want to check. But in this scenario, because it's all high cards and because the ace of diamonds is still very possible for either of the 2 opponents to have, I think you just want to go ahead and put money in the pot because you really need to get money in the pot early in the hand in order to get the remaining 1,500 big blinds or whatever it is in the hand by the river. That said, Mariano checks. Charles on the button with nothing, wisely checks behind. Let's head to the turn.
I cannot believe this. I have never seen anything like this in my life. Mariano in a 4-bet pot has flopped a straight flush, and Andy with the ace high flush. $27,000 in the pot. It checked through on the flop.
On the turn of 3 of hearts, complete brick, Andy checks again. You may be surprised to see Andy checks again with the ace high flush, but I don't mind it. This is a spot where you certainly can't expect Mariano to bet the turn kind of frequently if he has any sort of made hand at all. And the same thing goes for Charles. When you are first to act in a multi-way pot, you really do want to do a ton of checking, especially if you have a hand that's almost always good and not all that vulnerable to being outdrawn, because you have to presume most people are going to bet with a set or 2 pair on the flop. So in Andy's mind, he just has the nuts. He's not so concerned about the random King 10 of diamonds or 10-8 of diamonds raising from under the gun and then putting in a 4-bet. It's kind of unlikely. Not 100% unlikely, though. Anyway, Andy does check, which I think is good. And then Mariano has a very nice spot to bet again, just like on the flop. He really wants to start getting money in the pot against a random ace of diamonds or a queen or a 10 even that has a pair. So I like a bet, and I do think he needs to go small. Although, once you get to the turn, perhaps he should start betting a little bit bigger because he only has one more betting round to get money in the pot. When you're betting small on the flop, you can usually bet big on the turn and then giant on the river and get a ton of money in. But now that we're on the turn, if you bet small on the turn and giant on the river, well, you're still missing out on a giant bet that you could conceivably extract a lot of value from. Anyway, he goes 8,000. Charles gets out of the way. Let's see how Andy proceeds.
Mariano started this hand with about $300,000.
35.
Mariano bets $8,000 and just got raised. Imagine having a straight flush and getting raised.
Andy comes to life with a check raise at 35,000. Well, this is exactly what Mariano wanted, clearly. In this spot, I do think Andy should probably check raise because he's going to be against a lot of hands containing just the king of diamonds, which could call, right? But also a lot of queens or, maybe hands like, I don't even know, pocket tens that has a straight draw, although that probably doesn't bet the turn. Who knows? Maybe a hand like pocket kings that will probably call a turn bet, especially if it has a diamond. Maybe ace queen with no diamond that could conceivably call. This is a rough spot because it is kind of hard to find a lot of hands you're getting value from that would check behind on the flop. But kind of like Mariano, Andy, really wants to start getting money in the pot because he has, in his mind, the effective nuts. So I like the idea of raising. It's an unfortunate spot where I don't expect him to get a whole lot of value, but I don't really see any other good option. Obviously, he's not going to get a fold this time. But this is a tricky one where even though Andy has the nuts, and at this one it looks like Mariano could have a ton of hands, it's kind of hard to find a lot of hands that would 4-bet pre-flop and then check back the flop and then bet the turn and then call a raise, right? It's kind of tough to kind of tough for Mariano to have a hand that can continue, especially given Andy has the ace of diamonds. Whatever, I still think it's fine just to load money into the pot. Let's see if Mariano bumps it up again or if he just calls.
Mariano on the right side of your screen, right there, has flopped a straight flush in a 4-bet pot.
All 35.
$97,000 in the pot.
Mariano very wisely calls, in my mind. At this point, he has to consider what is he trying to get value from if he re-raises. Well, only the ace-high flush, right? And if Andy has the ace-high flush, Mariano's going to win a bunch of money anyway. Notice in this scenario, the next best flush Andy could even have is, what, an 8-high flush, which is very unlikely given it's a 4-bet pot. And that may not load all the money in anyway. So this is a scenario where Mariano definitely wants to slow play because if you consider a bet that Andy is likely to make on the river, it's going to be chunky, right? And that will allow Mariano to easily put in his remaining 150,000 or so over whatever Andy bets. So this is a great spot for Mariano to slow play. If Andy does have a set, Mariano wants him to make quads, right? This is a spot where Mariano cannot lose, so he wants to do everything he can to keep Andy in with whatever bluffs he has, mainly ace-high diamonds, maybe weird jack-9 or something that's making some crazy play, or with a set that may overvalue, or the flush, because if Andy does happen to have something like the 8-high flush, he'll perhaps bet again on the river. So this is a great spot for Mariano to call.
Board does not pair. It is a 4th diamond out there.
$120.
On the river, 6 of diamonds, which does not change a whole lot, although, it does block perhaps some random king-high flush, king-6 of diamonds that Mariano might have, although I think that's kind of impossible given the 4-bet preflop. And he goes for a big, big bet. 120K, more than the size of the pot. I suppose just trying to get called by aces, kings, queens, jacks, 9s, weird random flushes, weird 2-pair. And going back to what I said on the turn, it's kind of hard, I think, for Mariano to have those hands. And he may not even call with the hands worse than a set. So, tough spot where I think maybe Andy got a little bit greedy with this giant bet, unless these two have a lot of history where they're getting in there and they're battling hard against each other all day, every day. That said, he goes for a chunky bet, and look, going for a big bet with the effective nuts is rarely a bad play on the river. Let's see what Mariano does.
And Andy just bets $120,000. Mariano moves all in.
Mariano quickly goes all in for another $137,000. This is about the quickest I've ever seen anyone make a $137,000 raise on the river. Oh my goodness. Maybe a bit of a tell. We think Andy can sniff it out and find a fold? That'd be insane.
Nope. Andy calls and shows him the ace.
Oh my god. That's sick. Mariano.
$611,000 pot, and Mariano can't believe it. We've seen that before.
Open. No. Open 3 bet. In 3 bet. 4 bet.
Who has the straight flush? Mariano?
Yeah. Hey, nigga. Open. 3 bet. Call 3 bet. 4 bet. Call 4 bet.
Andy snap calls it off. And I think a lot of people look at this scenario and think that this is a spot where you have to call because you have the ace-high flush. And you're getting pretty good odds. And it's kind of hard for your opponent to have king-10 of diamonds or 10-8 of diamonds. But I'm not so sure that's the case. What hands will Mariano get to the river with and then just snap all in you? There's really not a whole lot of hands that make sense as a bluff except for exactly pocket 10s with the 10 of diamonds. I can't think of many others that would conceivably want to do this. Maybe he will do this with pocket kings as a bluff with the king of diamonds. Because in this scenario, for Mariano to bluff, he really wants to block the straight flush, which means that Andy cannot have the straight flush, right? And I think a lot of people think ace-high flush, auto call. But I'm not so sure it's an auto call, because if you consider the way this hand went down, everything looks super nut-heavy for Mariano, except for the pre-flop action, which I think really helped him. The fact that he put in the 4-bet pre-flop with the king-10 of diamonds maybe is what ended up winning him this pot, because there's like one combination of hands that Andy loses to, and when you can start to remove like the 10-8 of diamonds, and maybe even the king-10 of diamonds from Mariano's initial range, before the flop, then Andy has the nuts. That said, do you ever think there is a fold on the river? Do you think you could find the fold on the river? Andy did say this after the hand. You can read it right here below. Essentially, odds of flopping straight flush against a flush is very low. But sometimes the hand plays out such that your opponent has literally the nuts. And I think perhaps he's being a little bit critical of himself in this scenario, because look, Mariano's playing high 16s. He gets there and he battles. He may be a type of player who will find a bluff in spots like this. Maybe he's the type of guy who will snap rip it in on the river for the rest of his money with the 10 of diamonds. Not a lot of people do that though. And if Mariano's that kind of guy, maybe you have to call. Look, I think in this hand, unless I knew Mariano liked to 4-bet pre-flop with stuff like king 10 of diamonds and 10-8 of diamonds, which is very difficult to know unless you studied a lot of his footage. To be fair, I presume all these players in these Hustler Casino Live games, if they're being diligent, have watched a lot of footage of their opponents. If you know your opponent just never or almost never 4-bets those type of hands, you just got to call the ace-high diamonds, right? The ace-high flush in that scenario. But if you have seen your opponent 4-bet pre-flop with stuff like 10-8 suited or king 10 suited, then the fold becomes way more reasonable. One time I actually folded an ace-high flush on the river. I don't remember exactly how it went down. I remember I had the ace, I had like ace-2 of hearts, and the board was something like 7-8-9 of hearts. Okay? 7-8-9 blank of hearts. On the river, I bet, someone raised, and then someone shoved all in for a lot of chips. It was easy. That was an easy one. I folded. The other guy called, and would you believe it? I was against 2 straight flushes. What are the odds you make straight flush against ace-high flush? I don't know, but I only lost like 7 big blinds. Sometimes, when your opponents load their money in, and you have the third nuts, you just have to get out of the way. That said, this is one of those spots where I'm not so sure you can let it go, given Andy's getting really good odds, given the pre-flop action, and given Mariano is not afraid to battle. Tough spot for Andy. Andy stacks got stacked. Such is life. Reload and continue playing your best. That's gonna be it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, click the like and subscribe button down below. Click the notification bell. Click all the buttons around there except for the downward one. Hope you have a great, great day, and I hope when you make the ace high flush, you somehow manage to win the pot.